Hi, I'm Dr. Cooley, and in this webinar we're going to be discussing why are you always tired, or why are people always dealing with fatigue? A couple of goals I want you to have for this presentation is just understand that use fatigue as an indicator of your overall health. You might be able to go to the doctor's office, they might not be able to find anything wrong, your lab tests might all be normal, but you know that you don't have the energy to do what you want to do, or you always feel tired throughout the day. Use that as an indicator that something still isn't right and you need to try to work with someone or make changes in your lifestyle to improve that symptom. The other big thing is to understand that fatigue is a multi-layered problem. In order to address that, you need to look at all aspects of health, and that's why it's really good to work with somebody to help you get over that hump. Unfortunately, there's never going to be an anti-fatigue pill. There might be things that can help with that, but in general, it's such a multi-layered issue that you'll never get it. It'll never become fixed from just one medication or one vitamin or one supplement. And then the other point of this presentation is just understand, like, what are the major things what are the biggest factors that will cause fatigue? Now, granted, anything can cause anything, and anything can make somebody tired. But we're going to basically be highlighting the biggest things I see in like a clinical practice, why someone is tired all the time. So when it comes to combating fatigue, the first thing when you look at, well, how does our body actually make energy? All right, there are three big energy pathways in the body. One is called this creatine phosphate pathway, and for the vast majority of us, it's actually not that important because it's really there to produce these short bouts of energy. So it's really key for someone that's like a power lifter or something like that. But for someone that's just trying to get through the day, that's actually not that important. Our second big source of energy production is a process called anaerobic glycolysis, and this is actually taking sugar and using that as a fuel source, but not in the presence of oxygen. And when we're reliant on this as a fuel source, it's going to be for short bursts of energy, but longer lasting than the creatine phosphate pathway. And then the last part we're going to discuss is aerobic respiration. So this is actually being able to produce energy from sugar and fats and proteins in the presence of oxygen. And the big reason this is where we really want our energy production coming from is this produces much longer amounts of energy than anaerobic glycolysis or the creatine phosphate pathway. So when it comes to somebody like just trying to get through the day and just have more energy to get through life, it's really how well can we improve their aerobic respiration, okay? So when it comes to producing energy, we got three major fuel sources in our bodies. We have carbohydrates, we have proteins, and we have fats, okay? If you take a look at this slide, on this slide we got a picture of fats, we got a picture of carbohydrates, and we got a picture of proteins. I mean, basically, in order to produce energy from any of these compounds, we want to get into this thing called Krebs cycle. Okay, so Krebs cycle is the picture you can see in front of you here, and we're going to basically take these sources of fuel, whether it's from our diet, it's fats, or whether it's breads, or whether it's meat, and we're going to try to get into Krebs cycle. Once we're in Krebs cycle, our body can utilize oxygen in order to make energy. When it comes to these fuel sources, the most important fuel source that we want to utilize is actually we want to be these fat burners, okay? Fat metabolism is the most efficient energy source in our body. It provides the longest lasting source of energy, and we actually have enough fat, even on a very lean individual, they have enough fat stored on their body to last them enough energy for days and much longer than that, actually. And another way to look at it too is if you're a fat burner, you're not going to be a fat storer, okay? So it's a great way to lose weight is if you can turn your body into becoming a better fat burner. Unfortunately, it'd be nice if our body was just wired like, all right, we want to be fat burners. Why isn't our body just wired to always be burning fat all the time? And it has to do with our brain is actually a sugar burner, okay? So brain and red blood cells, they only utilize glucose and these other products called ketones as their fuel source. And a big stressor to the body is if the brain does not have an adequate source of sugar to use as a fuel source. And that's something that will kind of drive us away from being fat burners and move us towards being sugar burners, okay? There's a lot of areas where energy production can go wrong, and we're going to highlight all these different sources. It could be, you could have an immune problem, you could have just general toxicity, you could be anemic, you could have a lot of stress in your life, you could have a lot of hormone imbalances, you could just lack certain nutrients that your body needs to utilize in order to burn these fuel sources for energy, or you're not absorbing those nutrients. So when it comes to the immune system, I like to think of, and a lot of people have heard of inflammation, but what you want to look at is, I actually like to look at inflammation as essentially, that's an immune dysfunction, okay? So it's our immune system that controls our inflammation. And if we're having a lot of pain and inflammation in our body, like we're always like trying to take an ibuprofen, or we have a lot of swelling, a lot of chronic aches and pains, that's really, you need to look at that in your head, as that's an immune function, or immune dysfunction, actually. But the way that relates to energy production is when our body is inflamed, that Krebs cycle will get shut down, okay? And the best way to think of this is, if you're sick, you're going to be tired and you're going to want to be in bed, okay? And that's basically your body's way of shutting you down and let your body deal with this virus or deal with this bacteria that's in your system. Unfortunately, many people are inflamed, but they don't even know it. Like they don't, in some ways they're kind of sick, but they don't actually know they're sick, okay? A lot of people are dealing with chronic inflammation all the time. Another way to look at this too is that just the act of producing energy, that's going to be an inflammatory type of activity. It's like if you were having a campfire, the campfire is constantly producing energy, even though it's beneficial for you, keeps you warm, that's still kind of a volatile compound that you don't necessarily want to get too close to. So like if my body was already inflamed from trying to fight some infection, my body's not going to want me to be producing all this energy that can just kind of add fuel to the fire in some cases. So what are the big causes of chronic inflammation? Well, one of the biggest causes is going to be what I call dysbiosis, or stealth infections, or subclinical infections. Another big thing are allergies. Another thing is going to be antioxidant depletion, which could come from your diet. It can also come from overtraining, or just this too much environmental toxins in our system. When it comes to calming down excessive inflammation, there's a couple of key nutrients that I really look for. One is grass-fed butter. This is actually probably, of all the things that I have in my office to utilize for patients, which is a lot of stuff, this is probably the number one thing that I use for calming down inflammation. I may also use things like fish oil, a fish oil that's based on salmon, or I might use a fish oil, like a tuna-based fish oil. I use a lot of fat-soluble vitamins in the office. So these are things like vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E. I use those all the time in order to get someone's inflammation calmed down. Certain key other antioxidants, maybe something like resveratrol. It's actually like the healthy aspect of red wine. Vitamin C. I don't use typical vitamin C supplements. I really only use whole food sources of vitamin C. The ones I use in my office is something called Camu Supreme. It's this Camu berry that just has a really good source of vitamin C. And other key minerals for calming down inflammation would be things like zinc and magnesium and manganese. And I have to use those all the time in the office as well. Sometimes people need some of these things to help them deal with these stealth infections, or that dysbiosis I was just talking about on the previous slide. And that might be something like an herb called noni or neem, or an herb called coptis. I use that a lot in clinical practice too. But calming down inflammation, for one, it should just help reduce pain, but it's going to go a long way towards improving your energy levels too. So another big thing as to why someone is going to be inflamed is due to this toxic overload, okay? Or really what you can think of it as impaired detoxification in their body. So a lot of times patients come in and they're actually showing reactions to a lot of environmental stressors. And I'm talking patients that, not even like the obvious ones, like if you're smoking and you're working in a chemical plant, then it's pretty obvious that you're going to get exposed to some pretty dangerous chemicals, okay? But even people that seem like they live in like a pretty sterile environment are still getting toxic exposure. We're all getting toxic exposure. The big difference is how well can you clear it, all right? Now, unfortunately for somebody that's fatigued, how well you clear something is an energy dependent process. So somebody that's not really good at producing energy, they're not going to be that good at actually clearing toxins out of their system, and it's going to create this vicious cycle that's going to be hard to break. There's a lot of the key nutrients for calming down inflammation are very similar to the key nutrients for improving detoxification. A lot of things like zinc and magnesium, other things like some of the B vitamins like B6, folic acid, and B12. Those are key for calming down this calming down this toxic environment in our body. Another big reason why people don't have energy is they're anemic. So if you're anemic, your body is not getting adequate oxygen to all its tissues, okay? There could be a lot of reasons why people are anemic, but eventually, if you are anemic, you're not going to be able to produce energy. It's plain as simple as that. The other thing when it comes to addressing anemia is understand that there are things like what a typical Western or allopathic doctor are going to consider a normal blood count, and there are things that a functional doctor would consider normal. So like a functional doctor's range for what is good for a red blood cell number is going to be much tighter than what the range is for a typical Western medicine doctor. So it's basically like the ranges for having optimal health are a little bit harder to obtain than the ranges for obtaining just normal health, okay? So here I've listed a couple of the ranges that you really should use as a better marker of what's actually like a good red blood cell number when you get your lab tests done, or what's a good hemoglobin number. The other things, so say those numbers are off and you think you might have an iron deficiency, there's other tests you should do to make sure iron is the issue, because there'll be a lot of other reasons why someone is anemic. A lot of times people hear the word anemia and they're like, oh, I just need more iron in their diet, or in my diet. But unfortunately, that's not really the case. You should really have some of these other lab tests done to really evaluate whether or not iron is the problem. From what I see clinically, the main reasons for, some of the big reasons for anemia are, well, obviously iron deficiency, but you could also have a deficiency in copper, or you can have an excess of copper. If you have an excess of copper, that's going to create an iron deficiency, because these have to be in balance. And similar with the mineral molybdenum. You could have a B6, folic acid, or B12 deficiency. And these are some of the most common deficiencies that I see in clinical practice. Another big reason why someone will be anemic is if they're exposed to a lot of heavy metals. If you have a lot of heavy metal toxicity, that's going to have an effect on your iron stores in your body, or it can affect other minerals in your body like molybdenum or copper. If you're overtraining, so someone that's exercising all the time, a lot of times those people will become iron deficient. And another big reason is if like a female, if your menstrual period is really excessive, that's going to obviously cause you to lose iron stores, lose blood, and you're going to have lack of oxygen that way. So the next big thing we're going to talk about when it comes to fatigue is how stress affects fatigue. All right, so stress is really an all-encompassing term, but it can really mean anything. But in general, we're just going to think of stress as things that will increase our cortisol levels in our body. So this could be my life at work is really stressful. I got all these deadlines I got to try to meet. Or my home life, my wife is really on my case, or my kids are driving me crazy and that's making me stressed out. It could really be anything that that creates this problem. But the big problem with stress and just straight up fatigue is how if if I'm stressed and my cortisol levels go up, this is going to drive me not into aerobic respiration and not into burning fats. It's actually going to drive me into burning sugar as a fuel source. So it's not going to be as efficient. I'm not going to get as long of lasting energy when my cortisol levels are high, okay? And a lot of times this actually creates this wired and tired effect. I'm tired, I try to fall asleep, but my cortisol levels are high and now I can't even fall asleep because they're abnormally high at the wrong time of the day, all right? So the other thing that's tough is when we're really stressed, we're going to be driven towards eating and consuming things like caffeine and sugar, which are actually the exact opposite of the things that we want to be consuming at that time. We really want to try to get the caffeine and sugar intake down and relying more on better fuel sources like fat for energy, okay? So another sign that you're actually getting really stressed out is if you're constantly craving caffeine and sugar. That's a sign that you need to do something and change your lifestyle habits. Not to mention that when our cortisol levels are high, this is actually going to screw up all other hormones in our system. So when our cortisol levels are high, it's actually going to, one thing that will happen with our body is we'll actually start down-regulating our cell's response to thyroid hormone, or will inhibit our production of active thyroid hormone. So you could think of, if I got high cortisol, I'm actually going to have an underactive thyroid. It's kind of it's in some ways it's a protective mechanism of your body to basically almost try to like shut you down. Similar to like when you get sick, energy production gets shut down. When your cortisol levels are high, when you're stressed out too much, your body's going to start shutting down that thyroid in order to like tell you to scale it back, okay? Unfortunately though, if you don't have enough thyroid hormone around, you're going to be really tired. A lot of people are aware of this link. Like if you go to a general practitioner and you tell them that you're fatigued, a lot of times they are going to check your thyroid levels. But your thyroid levels a lot of times may come back normal, even though there's still a problem there. You could have a problem with your thyroid that's getting driven from these excess cortisol levels. You could get a problem with your thyroid that's getting driven from an immune problem. And all these things can actually, the lab test may show normal, but your thyroid is still under attack. When it comes to actually the nutrients that are necessary for energy production, there's a lot of nutrients that are required, okay? So these are some common minerals are going to be like magnesium and phosphorus, but a big thing for when it comes to energy production is really the B vitamins. So B1, B2, B3, B5, those are all really key when it comes to producing energy. And a lot of patients will be like, oh, I take a multivitamin, why am I deficient in this nutrient? And the way to like look at nutrients is a lot of times it's not, the reason why someone shows a deficiency in something, it's not necessarily due to a lack of intake. A lot of times it's your body is using it up. So if my body is burning sugar all the time, I'm going to burn through magnesium like crazy. And even though I'm getting enough magnesium in my diet, or what you would think is enough magnesium in my diet, I'm still going to be magnesium deficient. If I'm stressed out all the time, I'm going to burn through magnesium. A big thing when it comes to energy production, a lot of people are on cholesterol medications. If you take a cholesterol medicine, you're going to become deficient in a vitamin called coenzyme Q10. And if you become deficient in this vitamin, you are going to have inhibited energy production. And actually going to create inflammation in your body too. So make sure if you are taking a cholesterol lowering medication that you actually take coenzyme Q10 with it. A lot of athletes need to take CoQ10 anyways, just because of the demands that they're placing on their body. When it comes to energy production, another big thing I see all the time is people have this ammonia toxicity in their body. So there's a lot of people that are suffering from ammonia toxicity, and most people wouldn't really know what it is, but the basic signs and symptoms of that are going to be a lot of swelling, a lot of fluid retention, a lot of tingling type symptoms, a lot of like just weird nervous system symptoms, like maybe I can't fall asleep at night, or maybe I'm getting like really irritable. Someone that responds to a sedative like Xanax or Ambien or Lunesta or Klonopin, these are just like typical like sleep or anti-anxiety medications. A lot of times those patients, they have ammonia issues. So why would we have ammonia toxicity in our body? So our body's going to produce ammonia all the time. It's just part of normal metabolism, okay? But ammonia production and energy production, they're like these chemical gears. So when we're producing energy, our ability to excrete ammonia also improves. Unfortunately, if we're not good at excreting ammonia, it's going to take this gear and grind it to a halt. So these two things are very interlinked, okay? So you need to make sure that your ammonia, your body is able to clear this ammonia out of your system. It's a hard thing to do on your own, but a big thing when it comes to this, you'll always hear me harping on become a better fat burner, become a better fat burner, because one big reason why we're going to get all this excess ammonia in our system is if we're actually using protein, not to build our body up, not to build our muscles up, but we're actually using protein as a fuel source. Now we're going to create all this ammonia in our body that we're not able to process. Whereas if we were better fat burners, we wouldn't be relying on protein as this fuel source, and we would be able to metabolize this ammonia in our body very easily. So in conclusion, fatigue, obviously, there's a lot of reasons why someone can be tired. And again, use that as an indicator of your overall health. Like, use that to tell you that something is wrong. And whether or not you need to seek someone out to help you fix it, do what you have to do, but at least use it like, all right, I need to change some of my lifestyle habits. I need to start eating a better breakfast. I need to start incorporating better fats into my diet, okay? Like, use that as a way to tell you, yeah, something's wrong. I shouldn't be tired all the time, okay? And if you really have significant fatigue, you really do have to work with somebody that's going to look at everything. You can't just work with someone that's like, oh, you have fatigue, you must have adrenal issues. I'll give you this adrenal herb and you'll be fine. It takes a multi-layered approach to really combat this issue. If you got any questions on how I combat fatigue or how recommendations I might be able to give you, feel free to contact my office or email me, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. And thanks for listening to this webinar, and I look forward to hearing from you.